responsible to accept the blame. These were childish attempts to appear naive about who he really hated in these moments of pain, who it was he secretly despised for his suffering. The child in him wanted it. The child in him wanted it all, and the adult could find no reason not to give it to him. Getting what he wanted, when he wanted it, had replaced oh so many years of self-flagellation. He was the 10-year-old who, after a beating, would sink his teeth into his own forearm or the back of his hand until he tasted blood, silently cursing his parents, silently, without naming them. The reasons for the self-inflicted injury he couldn't even admit to himself. On some level, it was to make them sorry for what had happened, like they had caused him to hurt himself. And their punishment was going to make him do inexplicable things to show them how wrong they were for hurting him. But then he did his best to hide the bite marks from them, so that they wouldn't find out what he had done to himself. His motivations were very confusing, but to be anticipated given the circumstances. Dealing with the inner turmoil that results from having those who show you the most love also be those who cause you the most physical pain is difficult for an adult, next to impossible for a child. Another reason for his self-inflicted wounds was that he needed to be sure that he could hurt himself worse than his father could. And that wasn't always so clear. His father had a variety of things to hit him with. His belt, which he always folded in half so he could crack both halves together, and a terrifying sound that could be felt through the walls of the house. The large board that always hung above the mantel, which looked like it had the family name burned into it, something it had in common with the belt. Or sometimes he swung the random switch, cord, hanger, shoe, newspaper, mini blind rod, large spoon, and anything else that just happened to be near at hand. It was a very small shuffle into an adolescent who was obsessed with running until he passed out either from pain or exhaustion, as well as meticulously cutting neat vertical and horizontal lines across the top of his arm with a knife, or on occasion a pencil. This sort of behavior came to a head when at school one of his classmates let out a scream and subsequently started crying when she heard him rip a neat little gash down the soft, fleshy underpart of his right arm. First it was the principal's office, surrounded by lots of worried, frightened teachers and counselors, which he remembered thinking was odd. Why should they bother about something which seemed to him such a small personal matter? Perhaps they should have been more concerned about what would happen when they told his father. In the car ride home, Josh learned that the punishment would bring him within an inch of his life, and he remembered that it had been downright impossible to surpass a beating of that magnitude. He was running out of places to cut which he could hide. It had been one of those momentous beatings that would stick with him forever. Halfway through the horrible ordeal, his ass became elastic, and the pain went away for about a half a dozen swats. But this turned out to be a herald of a whole other level, the kind that made him see stars and turned his legs to rubber. He didn't remember when it ended. It was experiences like these that caused him to treat things like the pain in his wrist as an opportunity to endure, and a quiet victory that meant that he could continue with whatever it was he was doing. As with all things charged by compulsion, the self-inflicted punishment became most important thing once the catalyst, the beatings, had stopped. He became a long-distance runner for the pain and the opportunity to endure it. He was addicted to the seemingly impervious legs of the runner, when in the race moments of pain precede moments of senses too dull from too much pain. He had been taught from an early age that his body was a temple, and according to his father, sometimes you just got to beat the fucking bejesus out of the temple. And he worshipped those sweet endorphins, their beautiful and natural high, as well as the ingratiating masochism that came with having achieved it. His father had probably carried more of the blame than he ought. The man was acting on what he knew, and genuinely wanted what was best for his son. He was, after all, a product of his own father, the old man who left shadows everywhere he went. And Josh's father was still so immersed in them that Josh would catch him occasionally strangling the air with both hands. Josh wasn't much improved himself. He obviously was gratified by enduring pain, by satisfying a body which desired to be wound up so tight that it might once again escape the prison of feeling. What his father understood was that necessary pain at his hands might deter from unnecessary pain at the hands of someone else, or Josh's own misguided choices. Choices which may have been avoided, all for lack of a better explanation, described as workings of the devil. What the man didn't understand was that the nature of the human asymptote, of approaching but never arriving, that by causing his son pain in the first place, he had created a hole which should only be filled with more pain, in which each successive stab gradually raised the bar, until an inversion was inevitable.